Hello, everyone, and welcome to AlphaStaff HCM's webinar series. Today's webinar, AlphaStaff 401k, What Employers Should Know, is an hour long and will be presented by Sherry Friat, who I'm going to introduce shortly. Before we begin, I would like to provide a brief technical overview. As you may have noticed, all attendee phone lines are muted and will remain so throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, please enter them via the Q&A feature as you think of them, or you can wait to add them to the end of the presentation when we open it up for questions. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing on alphastaffhcm.com under the Resources tab. Attendance in today's live webinar is approved for 1 credit with both HRCI and SHRM. At the end of the presentation, I will share the contact information needed to request the credit codes. Now, I would like to introduce today's presenters. Sherry Friat is a financial and LPL registered representative with over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry. Her focus includes individual wealth management, financial planning, retirement planning, and financial wellness education. In her current role with Hub International, Sherry is the Vice President of Employee Education and Engagement. She is focused on educating employees on all aspects of their retirement plan and overall financial wellness. Without further ado, I would like to pass it on to Sherry.
Well, thank you so much, Charlene. I appreciate that. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'm excited to get to share more about what we do as your plan advisor. So we're going to start talking through an introduction of Hub and what we're here for. And then we'll go through the specific retirement plan details and then spend some time on some of the questions that you may hear most often or may have questions about yourself. So we'll go through all of this agenda and then have some time at the end for questions. But certainly, like Charlene said, put those in the chat and we'll try to address them as we go. Okay. All right. So first and foremost, let me tell you about what we do at Hub. At the highest level, we're an independent retirement plan advisor. And if you'll go to the next slide, I have it broken down a little bit. So we help with the selection and the monitoring of the investments. We work with the investment committee on a quarterly basis, really doing our due diligence. We look at many different factors to decide and to make updates if needed. We do benchmarking of the plan's fees and services, and we provide fiduciary training and oversight. We have to keep those regulators happy, right? So at the highest level, we're here to make sure it's just the best plan possible. But at the core of what we do, we are an independent expert and a resource for all participants of the plan. So we provide one-on-one guidance and support year-round for all of you, for your employees. We're here to answer questions and make sure that people have the information they need to make well-informed decisions. So I wanted to share the QR code there. This takes you right to a link to request a one-on-one, as well as our email and our phone number. And you all have access to our help flyer as well. So if you want to share that with employees, you can, and that's included on that. But what's important is to create awareness, right? Make sure that people know we're available. We're here to answer questions like, am I on track for retirement? Am I saving enough? And we want to make sure that people have a resource. If you'll go to the next slide, Charlene, there's never any judgment. There's never any sales pitch. There's no additional cost that people pay to meet with us. So I always say we're the best kind of advisor, right? If your employees come to you with these questions, or if you have these questions yourself, reach out. Even if you have an existing advisor, why not get a second opinion, right? We can provide that advice and the guidance that you may need, or your employees may need, right? We want to generate awareness, increase participation, right, and contributions within plans, and just make sure that you have access to us. So you'll hear me say it again throughout that these are great reasons to set up one-on-ones, but just know all of these things and more we can absolutely help with. So with that, we want to go over the plan details and understand that What we're going over doesn't mean that you have already all of this, right? But these are options and things available, and we wanted to break it down so that you're aware. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about just the advantages of having and offering a retirement savings plan. Ultimately, your 401k plan is an employer-sponsored plan that offers tax-deferred growth. It is the most advantaged way someone can save for future retirement. And you know it's good because the IRS puts contribution maximums on us. This year they did go up. If you're following, they went up by $500. But the limit for 2025 is $23,500 if you're under the age of 50. If you're 50 or older, you can contribute what they call a catch-up contribution. So that's an additional $7,500 for a total of $31,000 this year that somebody could put into the 401k plan. All right, and then just to keep us on our toes, the Secure 2.0 Act did provide for an additional catch-up. So I have that listed here. So starting at the beginning of this year, people who are ages 60 to 63 get to make an additional 50% catch up. So to keep it simple, I just wanted to put the full number. So the catch up contribution for those people who are 60, 61, 62, or 63 in this calendar year, that's the age they turn, they can do an additional $11,250. Okay, so $34,750 total that can go into the 401k plan. So these are large numbers that we can get put away that can grow tax deferred, possibly later be tax free. We'll talk about that with the Roth here shortly, but it's a great advantage. And it's one that a lot of people take advantage of, but there are still several who do not. So it's really important to create this awareness, create this buzz, and make sure that people know what they have available. One other change is coming at the beginning of 2026 through Secure 2.0 for individuals who earn over $145,000 a year. If they are taking advantage of the catch-up contribution, it will have to be directed after tax into the Roth. Okay, so previously you could make that catch-up contribution pre-tax, but starting next year, it will have to be directed to Roth. It will be after tax dollars that can be saved. Okay, so that is a new stipulation and one we wanted to make sure that people were aware of. This is all taken care of, behind the scenes and not something that you necessarily need to do something different for, but it is something to be aware of and that you need to communicate. Contributions come out automatically from paycheck. The percentage and the amount and how people contribute can be updated at any time. I always tell people it could be changed each pay cycle, but don't do that to your payroll team. But at the same time, it's fluid, right? They can make changes. And then the investment allocation can also be updated at any time. The great thing about this and why it's so advantaged is when you're contributing ongoing each pay cycle and you have a predetermined amount that you're saving, you are dollar cost averaging into the market. And dollar cost averaging, I would argue, is the best way to save for your longer term goals, right? Because you're not trying to time the market, right? Only go in when the market's down and only come out when the market's up. That would be great if we could get that right more often than not, but very rarely does that happen, right? Trying to time the market is virtually impossible. So an employer-sponsored retirement savings plan is the best way to save and hopefully encourage employees to take advantage of. So within the AlphaStaff plan, you have many different options. Can't fit everything on one slide, but we tried to get all the good ones on here. But first and foremost, there's no employer cost to offering the plan. There's many different investment options you have available, plus an option of having a self-directed brokerage account for employees. There's flexible plan design options. You have discretion over the contribution options. So as far as when participants become eligible, when they can enter the plan, having a match or not having a match or a profit sharing contribution, having a safe harbor plan or not, right? Whether it's year-end allocations, vesting schedules are up to each adopting employer. Okay, so let me just reiterate what that means for a second. Vesting schedules, if you are making a match contribution, there could be a time frame before somebody is fully vested in the plan. right? That question comes up a lot. What does that mean, investing? So you have options, right? And it's a great option to have. And then you have ongoing support, right? Most importantly, for guidance with compliance and regulatory requirements, they are forever changing. I don't want to say daily something changes, but it feels like it sometimes. And then you also have the 401k call center and well, I don't know that. I want to say millions of web resources. It looks like that, but several web resources that your participants have, in addition to having us as a plan advisor, right? So having somebody you can call and ask those more difficult questions to, and having a sounding board. So a lot of support there. And then 360 payroll integration, right? Whether it's to help with deferral changes that we talked about, setting up loans, hardship withdrawals if they're offered in the plan, the remittance for the contributions, right? There's a lot of support and ease of use within the AlphaStaff plan. All right, if you'll go to the next slide. In terms of contribution options, the next slide will go over the pre-tax and the Roth. Now, you may be familiar with this, but I wanted to break it down because there's two top questions we get as an advisor. I would say more than anything else. One is how much should I save? We're going to talk about that one here shortly. The second one is how should I contribute? And what is this Roth option, right? Because traditionally, 401ks were considered pre-tax, right? That's just what everybody thinks. I'm going to save on taxes if I contribute. And this Roth option came about years ago and still is not readily used, right? I would say it's drastically underused based on the conversations I have. So it's important as employers that you are familiar with the option and why it might be beneficial for some, right? So I just wanted to break it down with this example. I'm going to use the example that you're saving $250 per paycheck, okay? And you're in a 25% tax withholding. So I kept my math simple. But if you're saving pre-tax, I know it's intuitive, but what that means is $250 is going into the 401k plan, but because it comes out of your paycheck before tax withholding occurs, your reduction in pay would only be $188. Okay? So 250 goes in, but your bottom line is only reduced by $188. You're getting a tax benefit by contributing pre-tax as you go. Okay? If you were to save that same $250 and it be Roth, that comes out of your paycheck after tax withholding is applied, right? So the same 250 goes into the 401k plan, but your paycheck is reduced by that full amount. You're not getting any tax advantage as you contribute. But let's fast forward. Let's say we have 30 years until retirement. You're saving $500 a month, right? And we do that over 30 years. $500 a month, $6,000 a year, over 30 years is $180,000. Told you I'm keeping my math simple. But let's say over 30 years, you contribute $180,000 and that grows to be $880,000 30 years from now. Okay, from that compounding return, which we're also going to show later. But when you get to retirement, let's assume you're 65, you have this $880,000 sitting in your 401k, and the first year of retirement, you need $50,000 for expenses. If you took $50,000 out and it came out of your traditional pre-tax 401k balance, you are taxed on that full $50,000 as ordinary income based on whatever your tax bracket is that year in retirement. Okay? Takes all sources into account. So because you saved going in, you have to pay coming out. Okay. Now with the Roth, same example, right? You're putting the same contribution amount in, it's growing at the same rate because it's invested in the same way. You get to retirement, you take that $50,000 out, it will come out 100% tax-free as long as you're at least 59 and a half years old when you take it out and you've held the account for at least 5 years. Okay. Now, there's a big difference there, right? Tax-free money in retirement versus I have to pay taxes on it. So if you go to the next slide, the things you want to consider when you're making the decision of which one might be better really comes down to two. And this is where if employees are asking you, absolutely direct them to us as an advisor. We can talk through this with them. But it really comes down to what do you expect your tax rate will be in retirement versus what it is today? Okay. Now, I don't know what the tax brackets will look like when I retire. I don't really know what they're going to look like in a year, right? But I don't imagine they'll get better. If anything, maybe they'll get a little worse or they'll stay the same. So you have to think about income, right? What income do I make today and what do I think I'm going to need in retirement? And ultimately, if you feel like your income need is going down when you get to retirement and it's a lot higher now, well, then pre-tax might be better for you, right? Go ahead and save on taxes now and deal with them down the road. If you feel like it's the opposite and you feel like your income or your tax bracket will go up over the years and in retirement will be higher, well, then Roth might be better, right? But the second factor is time. And you want to think about how much time do I have for my account to grow, right? Remember that tax deferred growth. So over the years, and in my example, we had 30 years of growth for these Roth contributions. So if you have $180,000 in contributions that grows to $880,000, right? You have $700,000 in earnings over 30 years. Well, that's a long time and a lot of earnings, right? So to have that, if that were Roth, for that $700,000 to never be taxed, well, that's a great advantage, right? So you have to think about both. And then understand that it does not have to be an either or decision. You can do both, right? If you like the idea of having some tax-free income now, but also like the idea of having some tax-free income later, well, do both, right? If you offer an employer match, the employer contribution will stay pre-tax regardless of what the employee decides, right? But they still receive the match regardless. So just understand that. Now, Secure 2.0 did also stipulate that an employer can do a Roth match. I will tell you in all the plans we work with, nobody is doing it yet. I don't even think there's any payroll system set up for it just yet, because there's a lot of things that would have to be put in place for that to happen. So if you've heard buzz about that and you're questioning it, that's why. But right now, employer contributions will be pre-tax regardless. The other thing I want you to know as an employer is that the Roth 401k, it's not a Roth IRA, right? That's another misconception that I hear a lot is, well, I already have a Roth IRA, so I just want to do the 401k, right? This is an option to do even more in the Roth within the employer plan. All right, an in-plan Roth rollover. Again, this is not something that everybody on this call will already have or offer, but it is something that is available should you want to offer it. So an in-plan Roth rollover, also known as an in-plan Roth conversion, right, is the ability to transfer a pre-tax portion of your 401k into the designated Roth account within the same plan. So any balance that you have that's fully vested, right, in the 401k plan that's pre-tax, you have an option that you could convert it to Roth, right? So there's a lot of considerations if somebody wanted to do that they need to think about because those conversions are taxable events and you cannot pay the taxes within the plan, right? So you have to be prepared to pay taxes outside of the 401k plan if you were to do that in-plan Roth rollover. Okay. And if you go to the next slide, I talk about the tax considerations. So with different tax considerations, you want to think about the one-time conversion is going to generate a 1099. So let's say you have $5,000 in a pre-tax balance and you want to put it over to Roth, right? You like the idea of having that tax-free income later. So let's try to get it all there. Well, you can do that, but that $5,000 will go onto a 1099. You'll receive that and have to file it with your taxes, and it will be added to your total taxable income for the year. And you need to pay taxes outside of the plan. So you really have to consider where am I at from an income perspective, right? Is this conversion going to take me maybe to the next tax bracket? Am I in a position where I can afford the taxes now? So you really want to have a good strategy in place if you are debating doing an in-plan Roth rollover. Um, But also understand if you want to offer this as an option, you also, or if you do already, I'll say it that way too, you also want to make sure your employees know they have a resource and they want to make sure they ask the questions to know they're making a well-informed decision, right? Because there's a lot that goes into it. The other considerations you have are based on time. So on the next slide, I spelled it out a little bit that ultimately the longer you expect you'll have your money in the Roth 401k, right? If you do this conversion, the larger the benefit would be, right? For reasons like we just talked about. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily, okay, I have 5 years till retirement, so probably the conversion's not a good idea. Well, it's not about when you'll retire, it's about when you'll use the money that you're considering converting, right? So I might plan to retire in 5 years, but this money that I'm going to roll over to the Roth will be money I won't probably use for 15, 20 years, right? So if you have a longer time horizon, then it definitely could be a benefit and worth paying the taxes on doing that conversion. It also could be a smart move for a high net worth individual or someone who in this 401k plan, maybe they don't expect that they'll need the money that they're saving here, right, for income. Maybe they plan to have a lower income need in retirement and they have other sources that will cover that. So if you're looking at creating more of a legacy for your children, your spouse, then possibly converting those assets and getting them into that Roth bucket could be a great strategy, right? I always like to put it out there just plain and simple. Generally, doing a conversion may not make sense if you have less than 5 years, right? And I would argue probably doesn't before you'll start using the money. And most importantly, because there's a 5 year rule with the Roth distributions and a conversion counts as a taxable event, right? So if you're not going to keep it in the Roth for at least 5 years, you're not going to meet that 5 year rule, and there would be a 10% penalty on any money that you then take from the Roth. So just something to consider. Again, there's a lot of factors. So this is another great reason that you set up time and meet one-on-one to make sure you get your answers that you need to make this decision. All right. So let's talk about the number one question. How much should someone contribute? And I don't know as employers if you get this question as much as we would, but a lot of times people just don't know, right? So I wanted to give you the answer that I always give. And it's a frustrating answer for some, but my answer is always you should be saving as much as you reasonably can without jeopardizing your day to day, right? Now I've been in this industry 23, almost 23 years. Oh my gosh. And I've been an advisor and worked individually with clients for at least 70% of that time directly. So in that time, I can tell you this question comes up regularly, and I've yet to meet someone who told me they saved too much. Now, if that's you and that's your employee, that's great, right? I'd still like to meet them. But if you save what you can, that's the great starting point, right? Because, I might tell you 15% is the number, but if you can't do 15%, that doesn't mean do nothing, right? What that means is do what you can, increase as you're able, and set goals for yourself, right? Now, if you're offering a match, certainly, encouraging employees take advantage of that, or you yourself taking advantage of that would be a great starting point, right? So take advantage of the match that you have available to you. But again, if not, you start where you can, increase as you're able. The number that you'll see if you look at any kind of retirement planning tool or if you listen to podcasts, people do throw out 15%. You should save 15% of your income towards retirement. And if you can do that, great. But I would also argue if 15% doesn't max out your contribution for the year, you should also continue to do more if you can, right? Save what you can, increase as you're able. But the biggest thing to think about is, am I reviewing my contributions regularly? And what I mean by that is life events happen as you have extra. These are the things you want to go back and look at, right? So if somebody has a promotion or a pay increase or they get a bonus, right? It's a question to say, like, have you considered increasing retirement plan contributions? So something to think about. And on the next slide, compounding return is a great way to demonstrate the impact it can have, right? So again, the 401k plan is the most advantaged way to save, and the compounding returns, I mean, truly, I think speak for themselves. But when you start early, even at a smaller number, increase along the way, it makes a huge difference. So I put this example out because I think it really demonstrates that point. But just using a $60,000 salary as a base and then a 4% up to a 10% employee contribution, showing the growth over 20, 30, and 40 years, right? Depending on where people are, this is only assuming a 7% rate of return. Now, 7% is what I would consider a moderate risk average return. So if you had like a 60-40 portfolio, 60% equity, 40% fixed income, I would expect somewhere around a 7% average return. Can't promise the future though. But using that and understanding if somebody has 40 years, they may even be taking a greater risk. So their numbers may be more, right? But it's a great way to show people, look at a big difference it can make, right? So if you start at 4% and you start contributing and then you increase it to 6 and then to 8, just think about how that can grow and where you'll end up. And if you have employees, especially younger employees that, are not contributing or don't see the value yet, show them something like this or encourage them to, set up a one-on-one, right? Even if they could save $25 a paycheck, it makes a huge difference. So that is definitely something that we see or hear a lot is people don't even realize what they're missing out. Um, Go ahead to the next slide. This is our QR code again. And this is my information directly. So if you have employees that you want to lead to us and have them reach out for questions, certainly you could do that. You can email directly to me. If you want to set up time to meet one-on-one or have your own questions, certainly reach out. The important thing is that you have a resource, great plan options. If you're curious about options that you don't have in a plan right now, certainly reach out. We're happy to talk through benefits. But let me just pause and stop talking for a few minutes and ask you, other than what I've talked about, what other questions do you have? And I don't know, Charlene, if any questions have come through the chat. Oh, you're on mute, Charlene.
Thanks for that. So the first question that we received are rollovers permitted? And do you roll over a previous employer plan?
So yes, rollovers are permitted into the plan. And whether or not to roll over, there's a few things to consider. I'm a big fan of consolidation. I think it's, keep life simple. But you always have options. So if you have former employer plans that you're considering what to do with, know that here's your options, right? Your option is probably, if you've left it there so far, you can leave it there, right? You can roll it over to your new employer plan. You can also roll it over to an IRA or Roth IRA, depending on the type of assets outside of an employer plan, right? So that's something that you would manage and control at that point. You can take a withdrawal. I don't recommend that one because that comes with tax consequence and possible penalties, but it's your option. But you do have those options, right? Which option to choose comes down to what's important to you, right? If you roll it over to your new employer plan, you have consolidation, you have oversight, you have access to advisor, you can see that growth compounding all in one place, which tends to grow, percentage wise, not faster, but dollars wise, right? You're watching it grow faster. So there's a lot of benefit there. And from an investment perspective, there's so many robust options that I think you have a great lineup and that it would be well diversified still. But if you wanted to have more control, right, or have different investment options than what would be available in the plan, that is your option. You could roll it over to an IRA or Roth IRA too, but understand that there's no governance of that, right? You are your own um, governor of that if you have an IRA or Roth IRA. So there are definitely options. And I would always say if employees have questions, we have a great rollovers options brochure that goes over that. Or again, it's a great topic for a one-on-one. But the shorter answer is yes, rollovers are absolutely possible and encouraged, I would say, but there's options.
Thank you for that. Another question we receive is it possible to offer this plan to a certain group of employees only? For example, offering the plan to management level or only full-time employees?
Yesenia, I'm going to let you speak to that because there's definitely some compliance and or red tape involved there. So,
There is, and that's something that we would have to jot down, Charlene, and take back and then get back to the client on because that would also, there's a lot more to it than just that question. So we would have to get back to them.
All right. We will reply to your answer from the
Mhm.
webinars at alphastaff.com email by the end of day today. Thank you. Another question. How often can changes be made to a contribution amount or investment options in the 401(k)?
so the essentially you could make daily changes for both, but the contribution changes are per pay cycle. So if you made a change 5 times in one pay cycle, it'll be that final change that takes effect. So it's once per pay cycle that a change will go into place. So I would always tell people, if you wanted to change your contribution a couple of times in the year, totally fine. As far as investments go, though, they can be changed daily. I don't recommend that, but it's up to you. You're in control. So if you wanted to go in and make a change to your investment elections, you can absolutely do that ongoing. What I do encourage is that well, either once every 1 or 2 years, or as a big life event happens, right? There's a big change to your picture, right? Whether it's I'm making more money now, or I think I might need more money in retirement, or my timeline has changed, or my level of risk tolerance is changing, right? Those big things. Those are times where I would absolutely say it's worth a conversation to decide if an investment change should occur, right? Otherwise, my viewpoint on things like retirement investing is it's a long-term plan, right? So you want to have your timeline, your emotional comfort for risk, and you want to put your plan in motion and then feel confident that you don't have to really worry about it for some time until you get closer, right? That's the idea. But if you wanted to do it more frequently, you absolutely can.
Thank you. If the employer is not able to do a matching contribution at this moment, could that be changed in the future?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Yesenia. I see you shaking your head too.
Yes, absolutely, you can. You can set up a plan right now as it is today as a deferral only plan, meaning only employees defer. And when you guys are ready as an employer to offer that, you can go ahead and amend your plan to do so.
Another question. How can I transfer my current 401(k)?
Great question. So anytime you're looking at doing a rollover, it's two-part process, right? The first one is to reach out to your previous record keeper and let them know that you want to do the rollover. And they'll have a distribution process. Most of the time that can be done online and it will be an online withdrawal request. It sometimes requires paperwork, right? It depends on the employer, depends on the plan and the provider. But you have to do a distribution request. You want to let them know I'm looking to roll this over to my new employer plan and complete that distribution form. And then on the receiving side, in this case, you'd want to let Emeritus know that you have the incoming rollover and where it's coming from. They're going to ask for certification that it's a qualified plan and that it's coming in because that way it's coded as a direct transfer and there's no tax obligations, right? There's no tax consequence to you. So two sides, pretty simple process, right? It just takes two different touch points. But great question.
When should we direct participants to contact Emeritus versus Hub?
Oh, that's a great question. So, very simply put, if their question requires advice or guidance, definitely Hub, right? Because Emeritus cannot provide advice or guidance to employees. So if their questions are, am I on track? How much should I save? How much risk should I take? Right? Those questions that are not just straightforward yes or no, those would be hub questions. If their questions are plan specific or how to make a change, navigating the site, looking for a resource online, more tactical things, those are questions to direct them to Emeritus. Also, password resets or problems logging in. I wish I had that power, but definitely send them to Emeritus for that as well.
Thank you. Can you do a presentation similar to this one today for staffs, employees?
We absolutely can. I don't know if I'm giving anything away by saying we've already talked with your AlphaStaff team about providing a broader education for employees and figuring out the logistics. But I would just say if you're interested for that for your employees, reach out to your AlphaStaff team there and um, they can assist.
Another question just came in. If an employee is faced with an emergency, how do they go about withdrawing money from their 401k?
So essentially, they would do a withdrawal request if the plan allows hardship withdrawals, right? If your plan has that option, um, there it would go through the process, right? And there's documentation that would need to be required depending on what their situation is. But there's specific stipulations as far as what constitutes a hardship. But provided it falls into one of those criteria, which if it's true emergency, likely would. It'll be a very clear process. They would definitely just go through the distribution request and then work with Emeritus to get that processed for them. The other thing I would say is if you have somebody going through that type of hardship or that's needing that financial withdrawal, even though it's a moment of like just need, I need to get it done, I would also encourage them to reach out for a one-on-one just to talk through everything, right? Just to make sure they've turned over every leaf to make sure they've got, no other options. Not that we're trying to talk them out of doing it, but it's important that they're informed and educated about the implications, right? Because in the moment when you have a big financial emergency, and we've all been there, right? It's hard to not see anything but just get it taken care of. And sometimes there might be another answer. So that would be another great reason. Have them reach out. I promise you, they're never, receive any kind of judgment or, you know, uh, pushback. It's really just to make sure they're making a good, more informed decision for themselves.
Thank you. Another question. How should the current market environment impact my investment decisions?
My very instinctive answer is always to say, well, it shouldn't if you've done it right. But let me explain that by saying that's why it's important to plan and to know that you feel confident in your investment decisions and your timeline. So when you're investing for the time that you have, so let's say I have 20 years for when I plan to use my money in retirement, and I'm investing with that in mind. Well, I have plenty of time. And honestly, right now, I'm very aggressively invested personally, right? So, if 2008 repeated itself, then my account might be down 35, 40%. And that could be really scary, right? But I'm emotionally comfortable with that. And I know that I still have 20 years. So you know what? I can weather the storm. I'm going to wait it out. Not a big deal. So if 2008 does repeat itself and my account goes down, I'm not doing anything different. I'm just waiting it out, right? So you have to be invested in a place where you're comfortable and confident and you understand the risk so that if the market does take a turn and you're seeing this turbulence, it doesn't come as a surprise, right? Because that's what happens, right? We're surprised. It gets really fun to watch double-digit returns for a decade and then we get really used to it. And then all of a sudden something happens and we start to panic. And when we panic, we let emotions take over and then sometimes we make rash decisions. And that's what we don't want. That's the biggest mistake you can make when it comes to investing. It's don't let the current day market impact your longer term goals. Now, if retirement for you is 2 to 3 years away, and right now you're 100%, aggressive and you're taking a bunch of risks because the market's been great, I would argue you need to reevaluate that. right? You want to start protecting those assets that you'll need in the first few years, at least, of retirement. So you want to set yourself up in a way that there's not going to be reason to panic. So if that is you, if you are somebody who is thinking, well, what if the market turns? I might, what should I do? I need to get out. We need to have a conversation before that happens. Because then when it does happen, you don't have to do anything, right? So it's not me being, smart answer. It's really just to say that's why planning is so important.
You? Can I start and stop contributions throughout the year?
Yes, absolutely. The only stipulation that I'm going to say, and this does not apply to all, so is if there is a company match and it's per pay period matched and you were contributing and then you stop and then start back up, you may miss out on some of that. Right. So it would just be a consideration to know what you're not getting, but you absolutely can. You can contribute, and I know people that try to put everything in the first 6 months of the year and then they don't contribute the last half of the year. You absolutely can do that anytime.
What happens to my 401k if I leave my current company?
So if that were to happen, you have options. Depending on your balance, because there is a minimum balance requirement for it to stay in your employer plan. I do not know if it's the same or exactly what it is for all plans. So I'm just going to say typically, if you have at least $5,000 saved, it could stay with the plan. That might be a lower number. I don't know. Um, but it could stay where it is, right? If it stays where it is, then it will stay there until you decide down the road to do something different. But you also have the option that you could roll it over to another employer plan. If you have a new employer that you want it to go into, you could roll it over to an IRA or a Roth IRA outside of an employer plan. Or you could decide to cash it out if you wanted to. Again, not recommended because there's tax consequence and possible penalties, but you will absolutely have options. So I always tell people if you're and when it happens, if you were to terminate from the plan, you will receive a packet going over all of those options. And then again, you can always reach out and talk through those with us, and we're happy to help.
When do I know if I am fully invested in my employer plan?
Fully, but I
Fully
think
vested.
fully vested. Okay. So it will tell you when you look at balances, um, your percent vested. So if you don't have a vesting schedule, if you're immediately vested if you have employer contributions and it's immediate vesting, you won't see that. It'll just all be 100% vested. But if there is a vesting schedule, what you will see is the breakdown and you'll see those employer contributions and the percentage that is vested right in your balances. So it's very transparent and clear when you look at the contribution sources, it will tell you.
You? Are loans available for certain purchases like home purchases or car loan purchases?
Mhm. So if your plan allows loans, then generally there's going to be the option of having a general purpose loan or a primary residence loan. They have different payback periods, right? So general purpose loans generally have up to 5 years that you can repay. Primary residence loans will have up to 10 to 15. Again, it depends on the plan guidelines that you've chosen. But you absolutely could then leverage the loan option to get the money. General purpose loans could be used for whatever you wanted it to be, whether that's a car or home improvements, whatever it may be. Um, but again, you always want to look at your options. So if you have, whether it's yourself or employees looking at taking loans for different reasons, I would always tell them, reach out, let's talk one-on-one and make sure that it's the best option given the circumstances. The other thing with a loan is there's always an interest rate that is applied to the loan repayment. Now, it goes back into the account, right? So it's not going to emeritus, it's not going to the plan. Like it does go back into the account, but it could be offset maybe and be a lot more than it would be if you had interest rate elsewhere. So there's definitely still considerations. But yes, If your plan allows for loans, you have the option for both things.
Who do I contact at AlphaStaff if I have plan questions?
It would be me, so you can always start with me, and if obviously if there's any investment questions or things that need more advice on the investment side, I will go ahead and redirect you to Hub. But Justenia Vasquez would be the contact here in Alpha Staff that you would reach out to for 401k questions.
Thank you. There's a question that came in. Will this webinar be available to show to others? And I will take that one. Yes, all of our webinars are recorded and they will be available on alphastaffhcm.com under the resources tab, usually within 24 hours. And you can share it with whoever you would like to view the webinar. If we have any more questions, we have a few more minutes to allow a few more questions. So we can make sure we've answered all the ones that have came in. I'll give it about another minute and then we'll move on. Right, so copies of today's presentation can be requested as well as the HRCI insurance code by sending an email to webinars@alphastaff.com. And we'll typically respond by the end of the day or the following day. Right. Please be sure to join us for the next webinar next week, Thursday, September 18th at 1 p.m., where our legal partners, Ogletree Deacons, will be presenting Immigration Compliance in 2025, Maintaining a Compliant Workforce During Challenging Times. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for your time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be happy to see you again at the next webinar.